Hey guys, welcome back to Aclaimant Fireside Chats. I am super excited to be joined by a longtime friend, speaker, author, and risk strategist, Princess Castleberry. Princess, welcome to Aclaimant Fireside Chats.
Thank you for having me, David.
Absolutely. So I think, as you know, Aclaimant Fireside Chats like to highlight people doing interesting things in the risk management space across the spectrum, and your work absolutely falls in here. I'm going to try to get your background. I know it's a lot in a short time, but you were at an agency, you were at a real estate company, you were at a big staffing firm in the first chapter of your career, and you were doing everything in enterprise risk management, insurance, disaster recovery, et cetera. And now in your second act, you have become an advisor to large organizations thinking about how behavior affects risk management. How did I do in terms of getting to how you got here in two sentences?
Yes, you nailed it. You nailed it perfectly. That's exactly where I came from. I started in the Fortune 500 with working with Marsh for many years and transitioned into in-house risk management very early on in my career, working with Pulte Homes, and then landed for the bulk of my career where I say I grew up in the staffing industry working with Kelly Services, and I've done everything there from, as you said, business continuity, disaster response planning, property and casualty, executive services, risk, you name it. I was a part of the solutions engine at Kelly Services. And it's exactly how I got introduced to Aclaimant. And it's really, really early days before it was a full-fledged product. I was a part of Aclaimant, I feel.
Yeah, but it was great to have you here early on. I just think we were both figuring out what we were doing next with our lives at that point in time. So you went from maybe more of where our traditional sweet spot is in terms of like the in-house risk management team. Talk to me for a second about your transition from saying, I want to be inside of a company, I want to be helping teams do stuff internally, to now today where you are an influencer in the risk management space. Talking about what happened and some of the work you're doing today.
Well, my entire career trajectory was always about reach and impact, right? I wanted my work and my ideas to have reach, and I wanted the ideas that I had to have real impact, not only on leaders, but on their teams and on the communities at large. So I feel like making the transition out of traditional corporate America was a natural progression for me. I've always been somebody who was deeply concerned with not just what leaders could accomplish, but what made leaders perform well, right? How they thought, how they learned, what made them well, what made them unwell. And so I almost developed an obsession with watching leaders perform. And I've seen some extraordinary ones, present company included. I've seen people struggle in leadership. And I just became really obsessed with how that impacts the bottom line. And then further, how it impacts the things that we're trying to protect most in the company, which is usually our people, purpose, and our profits.
That's wonderful. I think they made a great transition here. So I guess in the work you're doing today, you are working with a variety of leadership groups and organizations. What are the 2 or 3 biggest focus areas that you have when you kind of think about talking to teams about risk management and the work you do presently?
Yeah, so I have the pleasure now as, I built a global speaking platform and I work with a lot of large associations across a few different industries, across technology, hospitality, the health sector, health and life sciences. I honestly seeing a lot of the same things when it comes to leadership behavior and performance is that teams are still struggling with dealing with conflict. And there's a lot of that conflict happens because of internal change, pressure and structures, what's happening in the economy. So conflict is this like never ending thing that happens in workplaces. And so I like to teach people, instead of focusing on conflict, which is inevitable and a major part of innovation, I like to teach teams to eliminate conflict waste, right? Conflict waste, I know you're really familiar with the term risk waste, right? All the things that are going by the wayside, all this opportunity that we could capture. So I focus on conflict waste in the same way, really helping companies identify what gets lost when we avoid, mismanage, or escalate conflict too quickly. And so I'm seeing a lot of organizations care about that. And then even as we're several years beyond the pandemic, a lot of organizations are still deeply concerned with stress management and teaching people those skills, those very practical skills around how they manage their individual stress and build their own resilience as the company seeks to eliminate some of the chaos, eliminate the barriers that have kept people stressed out in their organization. So those are some of the trends that I see. And obviously, there's a huge trend toward AI integration. And when I talk about AI integration as part of my framework, I tell people you got to take the risk management approach and you have to integrate technology, including AI, but with discipline. And so I work with a lot of organizations in thinking through how all those things are tied together, how their workplace conflict is tied to the experiences with stress, and how all of that kind of comes together and impacts their ability to move forward into the future with things like AI.
Wonderful. No, it's obviously some super important different facets here. I guess maybe to dig in on some of these. So, well, let's come back to the AI stuff in a second, but on the conflict resolution and the stress management, I guess maybe draw the correlation about how you're helping companies think through risk management, risk prevention, focusing on those two avenues. Because I think that people don't always correlate those things
They
into the
don't.
world of risk management.
Exactly, they don't. So I always break it down first, and I introduce to audiences a very simple, basic definition of the word risk I've been using for more than 2 decades, which is that a risk is simply the possibility of harm or loss to something of value. So I get people grounded in what do you value in the context of this organization. So you get people talking about the profits, you get people talking about operations, how we all collaborate, get along. You get people talking about things like innovation. So you get them grounded in what they really value. So then we talk about and we link how their behavior creates risks in those areas. So one of the questions I famously ask in a lot of my keynotes, David, is I will ask the entire crowd in one word, tell me in your leadership, how do you intend to make people feel? Like, what do you intend to produce? One word, don't explain it. Most people will say things like, I want people to feel heard. I want people to feel valued, collaborative, smart, all these altruistic things. But then I flip that question on its head and I ask them, how do you actually make people feel when you're triggered and stressed? And I get a very, you're already thinking of yours, right? And
Yeah.
see, I know you, so I won't call you out. But that answer is very different. And so when you have somebody who is running operations for, let's say, a large manufacturing organization, and they're responsible for a team of 50 people, but you get them to admit openly and unabashedly that their tendencies go from these very altruistic, purpose-driven motives to something that is the complete opposite if they're triggered, then you can ground them to the fact that their behavior and their triggers matter and it has a direct outcome on the productivity of their team. So I draw that connection really fast. And it's one of the first things I do when I hit the stage is get people to recognize that their behavior is one of the core risks, not just to their individual leadership and health, but to the health and well-being of the team and the productivity of the team. And then everything else comes second. Because, and I learned this just in my own education, my own background. I don't know if you ever knew this about me, David, but unlike most risk managers, I don't actually have an MBA. Most risk managers, when they're pursuing and developing their careers, will pursue an MBA. I studied in training and development and instructional design and also wellness counseling. So I got 2 separate graduate degrees because I wanted to know how people performed, what made them perform, what made them want to be compliant with rules and regulations, what made them want to align themselves to a leader to move a culture forward. And so that's what I studied. And when you put all those things together, especially in the systems that I create for organizations, when you put those things together and you draw the correlations between a leader's behaviors and the outcomes of a team and how that impacts the bottom line, it's not as unrelated or uncorrelated as you think.
Yeah.
It's a real straight line. You treat me well, I'll perform. I'm already capable, I'm competent, I'm educated. But if you treat me well and you give me the systems and the tools, I can do the job exceptionally well and we can get to the bottom line that we want. When you don't,
Interesting.
we won't.
That's a very forward-thinking mindset here. And it's funny, I think a lot of times we talk very tactical about strategic application and insurance programs and
Yeah.
risk mitigation, but I think this behavioral approach to things, thinking about people as kind of part of this solution, fascinating. So I guess on that topic here, and just got to keep the conversation moving. So I think we talked a little bit about stress. We talked a little bit about conflict management. AI and future, I think, are kind of big thoughts on a lot of people's minds right now.
Yeah.
I guess as you're thinking about the path you've gone down on the risk management side, where are you focused on in the next couple of years? What are you talking to executives about, and what are the trends you're keeping an eye on? Maybe you can go one level deeper on kind of how you're thinking about AI adoption, AI management.
Sure. So my work, even related to all these topics, because you might be hearing all these things and thinking, how the heck does all this fit together? I actually created a model called the Live, Lead, and Build Leverage Framework, and it has
Mhm.
6 parts to it. And integrating technology with discipline is one of those parts. And even though this model does feel like something that's strictly performance and leadership driven, it is the entire model is based on risk management principles basic in the risk management process that you identify your challenges, your top risks, you assess them for likelihood and severity, you build solutions to them, and then you learn and manage through them. So I use that identify, assess, build, learn approach to all of these facets, whether it's alignment, conflict, stress management, and even in AI integration. So I'm talking to teams and leaders around how to integrate technology and AI with discipline. How do we put common sense guardrails in place to protect the data that we have, protect our obligations that we have through so many contracts, but still keep up with the times. And I think like just even coming off of this most recent holiday season and seeing some of the news around how AI was a big player in the Black Friday numbers that retailers were able to produce, like we're finally starting to see AI have some real commercial benefit. And so I think for the organizations that have operationally been trying to integrate AI and who have failed, because we see all those reports coming out of MIT as well saying that these implementations and these integrations are failing inside of their companies. I think that leaders should focus on some of the early wins that we're seeing in other industries and start to figure out and reverse engineer how they monetize AI the way the retailers are now doing it. But I still think AI is so early that we just have to approach it with like common sense risk management. Identify the parts of your organization that are most vulnerable to data privacy risk and issues and integrate cautiously. Don't force it on everybody. Give people a reasonable amount of controls. Give them some guardrails. And if somebody makes a mistake, don't overly punish somebody for it because we're all learning. That's kind of my message to companies as we integrate and move forward. But yeah.
I think that's very practical. It's very logical. Is there anything else on your mind doing forward thinking planning with executives? So I'm sure there's many things. Maybe if you were to give the kind of the people listening one other major area, major trend you're thinking about right now, what else is in the talk track you're having with some of these executives thinking about the future of their business and where risk management fits in?
Yeah, like bringing things honestly back home, right, to my own most recent project, which is my book, The Truth is in the Trigger. I want more leaders to be accountable for their communication in their own behavior and recognizing that it has a really deep critical impact on the health and well-being of their staff. There's a brilliant study that came out in 2023 by the Workforce Institute at UKG that showed that leaders and managers impact their employees' mental health more than therapists and doctors and at the same rate as their spouses. And when I ask audiences, I ask thousands of people that question, do you believe this? I put it up and I say, hey, it's not tied to me. It's not my study and not my stat, but do you believe this? And I get a resounding yes across all audiences, all industries. And I have leadership pay attention to stuff like that, that we have a tremendous amount of impact on people's well-being. And we don't have time to sit here and talk about all the data that shows how mental health and well-being and our lack of acuity sometimes drives directly to the bottom line. We know it already. So that's what I'm trying to get more leaders to pay attention to. And I'm trying to get more leaders to dial into what triggers their own behavior. Hence the book, The Truth is in the Trigger, which allows them
Amazing.
to explore that.
Wow. So you hit so many things there. And I obviously agree with many of them. I know we've talked about many of these
Yes,
before.
yes,
UKG actually, interestingly enough, has also been an amazing acclaimed partner.
yes.
We've kind of heard
I've
a
been
lot of them.
following that.
Yeah. And it's funny how it all ties together, all these things. It would be a kind of a good last segue here, which is obviously you're doing some incredible work with some wonderful organizations, Princess. For anybody who wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way? What are the things you're working on here to kind of give you a chance to maybe a shameless plug at the end?
Yeah, yeah. So you can always find me on my website, which is princesscastleberry.com. And I live and breathe LinkedIn all day, every day. And I think I'm still holding the record. I am the only Princess Castleberry on LinkedIn. So if you find her, you found me. And
Nice.
that's it. Yeah. Buy the book, book me to speak on your stages and to talk to your leaders because I got something to say.
Wonderful. Well, Princess, this has been amazing covering, I think, some brand new, fresh territory for us in Aclaimant Fireside Chats. We really appreciate the time you've taken to be with us today. And we will look forward to seeing everyone on the next episode of Aclaimant Fireside Chats. Thank you,
Thank you.
Princess. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, David.